Encompassing the posterior portion of the human cerebral cortex, the occipital lobe is primarily responsible for vision. The primary and association visual cortex are found here. The occipital lobe processes the majority of the spietal, temporal, and chromatic components of light falling on the eye's photoreceptors of the retina. Also, the occipital lobe recognizes movement and color. However, the occipital lobe does not act alone. The dorsal stream of the occipital lobe connects to the parietal lobe and processes where objects are located. The ventral stream projects into the temporal lobe and processes what objects are. There have been many studies conducted after trauma has occurred to the occipital lobe. Patients with props angosa have been studied to evaluate what has happened to induce the ability to recognize the faces of people. Another case study includes dream loss in stroke patients. This has been proved to be linked to occipital lobe damage. The Charcot-Willebrand syndrome, also known as CWS, was discovered during these studies. CWS denotes dream loss following a focal brain damage. A hypertensive 73-year-old woman was studied during this as she reported dream loss over a 3-month period. She had brain damage to the occipital lobe, and she was found to have CWS. While extensive research has not been performed, quality evidence suggests reduced activity in the middle occipital gyrus during executive functioning tasks in people with schizophrenia. Evidence also suggests reduced white matter integrity in the occipital cortex in people with schizophrenia compared to those without this disorder. However, it is important to note that extensive research has not been performed. So, it cannot directly be said that schizophrenia relates to occipital lobe damage. However, there is very strong evidence to say that there is a link. Damage is less likely to occur in the occipital lobe due to its location, as it is far back and under the brain. However, from injuries such as vehicle crashes, falls, firearms, etc., effects are seen as visual hallucinations, blindness, inability to see color, motion or orientation, and synesthesia. Traumatic occipital lobe injuries add stress and can cause depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and autism. The occipital lobe is heavily connected with the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. Hormones such as dopamine and norepinephrine affect the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. However, the occipital lobe most closely functions with the parietal and temporal lobe. This is because the dorsal stream and ventral stream previously mentioned connect to both of those lobes. The occipital lobe cannot function, however, without the frontal and temporal lobe. It is important to mention that the occipital lobe and all other lobes in the brain need each other to properly work. So, in relation, most chemicals that affect other parts and other lobes of the brain will also affect the occipital lobe and how it functions.